Welcome back to another episode of Before You Buy, the show where we give you some straight up gameplay and our first impressions for the latest games releasing. Way back in 2014, almost a full decade ago, we got one of the first Souls-likes with Lords of the Fallen. It was not great. For whatever reason, I looked back on the original Lords of the Fallen fairly fondly, but I went back to it recently, kind of because I was excited for this game, and it wasn't good. Honestly, objectively speaking, it was pretty bad. Certainly the subgenre wasn't really established in the way that it is now, and the only real people with experience in that highly specific type of game was From Software, but CI Games is having a do-over. That was originally going to be a sequel, Lords of the Fallen 2, removed the number, added the word the, so that it was in there twice, The Lords of the Fallen, then just plain Lords of the Fallen with a subtitle, Dark Crusade, and now just Lords of the Fallen again, a reboot. It's had a hell of a development cycle, too. Production's been rebooted at least twice, with new developers brought in and canned. The scope of the project got scaled way back, and then brought way the hell back up. Like, honestly, it's kind of a miracle we're even looking at a final game with all that turmoil. The developer behind the original, Deck 13, didn't return for this game. They actually went on to redeem themselves somewhat with the Surge games, which are honestly pretty good Souls-like games. But they have nothing to do with this, like I said. Hexworks, which is a new studio, is who came up with this one. I gave you a lot of background here because I kind of wanted to set expectations. This should have been a disaster, and it's not. It's actually pretty great if you can get past the technical issues. Now, you're seeing the footage, and you're probably noticing it already. It's the worst thing about the game, the stutter. Lords of the Fallen's PC performance, at least on the build I played pre-release, it's not good enough. Slowdown and stuttering are a constant irritant, and no matter what settings I adjusted it on, it just did not seem to make a whole lot of difference. The only way I was able to get a decent frame rate was to drop the resolution and crank the DLSS up to ultra performance, which it doesn't seem to do a whole lot, honestly. Listen, I don't want to turn this into a Digital Foundry style breakdown, but the performance absolutely needs to be better. I have a PC that's well among the recommended settings on the Steam page. It's not the best PC out there, but if it's supposed to run well on the recommended settings, then it should run well on mine. I don't know what's going on here. If you're on PC, don't even think about playing it without installing it to an SSD. It's practically unplayable on a standard hard drive. It's unfortunate because it's a pretty good Souls-like. There is a story. I don't know how much it matters. I do recognize some of the elements from the original game. There's the Rygar demon guys and the big hand in the distance, but you absolutely do not need to play the original. It doesn't matter. This is basically a reboot. The gameplay is, have you played Dark Souls? Well, it's that. If you've ever played a Souls game or a Souls-like, you will be at home. There are multiple classes to pick from at the start. You can customize your character, and then you're off to cleanse these 5 corrupted spots and save the kingdom. Along the way, you meet a whole bunch of dubious characters with their own motives, and everyone's going crazy like some kind of cackling weirdo. Everything is falling apart. It is a Souls game. It might sound like I'm calling it a copycat, but it is a reboot of a copycat. So, I mean, there's some element of course, there, but at the same time, I did tell you it's a good game, so I want to make it clear that I'm just kind of saying Souls-likes are Souls-likes. This one actually has some pretty good innovation. The most interesting is the lantern, this magical object you get at the start of the game that lets you see the world of the dead. It's a good-looking game in general, but the lantern's light is the most impressive trick. Turning it on reveals a grotesque alternate reality that can open up new paths and can be used to solve puzzles and hidden items. It's not just a place to look at. You can also transport yourself there using the lantern, and if you die, you'll come back to life in the land of the dead, which gives it a bit of a Sekiro-like twist. We've talked about Effect and Cause from Titanfall before, or a crack in the slab from Dishonored 2, the one in Stilton Manor. I like to talk about those a lot, and this reminds me of that, but in Dark Souls and not time travel, but rather alternate dimension. There's also additional things, like it's not just that it looks different, it's also more dangerous just by default. There's a risk-reward system to just being there. You get more souls, or vigor in this game rather, the longer you're in the land of the dead. Eventually, if you're here too long though, enemies start spawning more often, and an unkillable hunter will start stalking you relentlessly, draining your health and making it impossible to use healing items. So when he shows up, that's your cue to go. There are a few ways out. There's the usual save points, but there's also these corpses dotted about that let you revive yourself. The save points themselves tend to be spread pretty thin, so to survive, you're gonna want to find flower beds that allow you to paint mini checkpoints that can be a bit of a lifesaver in longer, more dangerous areas. Planting one of these things uses up precious resources though, so that ends another element of risk reward. Do you plant a seed now? Do you risk it, try to get further so that you're close to the boss when you do it? These are, I think, good ideas, and they work. So this isn't an open world game, but the most impressive thing about it probably is the world. It's like a true successor to the original Dark Souls interconnected map. It's a lot bigger, I'll say. The places you explore, they're all huge, complex mazes that interact with each other in very surprising ways. There was one moment where I connected back to the hub area. I was just legitimately shocked. It seemed impossible, but if you look, it actually makes a lot of sense. The variety of areas here, they're mostly all places you've seen in one form or another in Souls games. There's rickety wooden shacks hanging off the edge of a cliff, murky swamps that thankfully aren't filled with poison, burning villages, snow-covered hamlets, war-torn ramparts, etc., etc. If it didn't look so good, you might just excuse it all as another Lordran. But the environmental detail is fantastic. Every area here is so dense and complex in a way that would be exhausting if you just want a straight-up action game. But Souls games require a good exploration element, and this game just does it in spades. Just in terms of its exploration elements, it's probably one of the best Souls-likes out there. You need a good memory, though, because the map is kind of worthless. And there are moments where I got a key and I didn't really know where I was supposed to go with that key. At a certain point in the game, I had 5 distinct directions I could explore, each leading to new areas, which are all awesome. Like, I'm not complaining. That's actually great. It's really satisfying when these games give you different places to go, because if you get stuck in a boss or an area too difficult, you can go somewhere else, which I think is kind of better than the more linear game where you hit a wall against a powerful enemy and the only options are to keep getting killed until you master the fight, or to kind of backtrack and grind. This game lets you go somewhere else, which kind of works as grinding, except for it's doing something different so it doesn't feel like grinding. It's about as non-linear as a game like this gets outside of like Elden Ring, which is of course a full-on open world game. The combat, it's very strong. One thing that this game really embraces that a lot of Souls-likes neglect is player choice. It gives you an absolute ton of weapons, gives you tons of armor, tons of spells, and just lets you have at it. For the most part, it all feels really good to control too. Combat is fast and fluid. You can dodge, you can block, you can parry, and unlike a lot of these games, all 3 options actually feel viable. Parry timing is pretty forgiving, at least for this kind of a game. Dodging gives you a pretty decent amount of invincibility frames. Turtling up even feels good. Nothing is going to give you 100% damage absorption or anything, but the game has a Bloodborne-style health recovery mechanic that is also pretty forgiving for this type of a game. As long as you don't get hit a second time, that health will always be there for you to get back by attacking. And this is a minor thing, but another innovation introduced here is how ammo is for ranged weapons. Instead of just buying ammo, you always have a set amount that refills when you rest. It's good because there's often archers in this game hiding out in hard-to-reach places. There's one-use items that can refill your arrows and bolts called ammo pouches, but otherwise you don't really have to worry about counting every arrow you have. Ammo works more like a mana meter here, and I know that that's not realistic, but what about a Souls-like is genuinely realistic? Anyway, I like this. I think that it's a good addition. It shows that they put some effort into streamlining certain elements of these games, and maybe even, God forgive me for saying this, but balancing them. I don't know, it feels a little more fun, honestly. One thing they didn't change, though, was how jumping works. You still have to dash, then press a button to jump. It's still unnecessarily awkward, and I don't know why Souls-likes are so obsessed with replicating this. In Elden Ring, if you want to jump, you press jump. Is there really people that love how jumping works in Dark Souls 1? I know that somebody's gonna jump down my throat for that, but like, I really genuinely don't understand why this keeps popping up. It's not something I enjoy personally. That could vary, I don't know, but that's my opinion on that. Overall, though, combat is great, but it's also not the game's strongest aspect. Bosses feel a little stock a lot of the time. There's not a whole lot that's gonna surprise you here. They're fun to fight, and they sometimes have some interesting tricks that spice things up. But in comparison to, like, Lies of P, there's not a lot here that's gonna wow you. I do appreciate the game's commitment to old school design by having you fight a lot of the bosses in unusual areas, or ones with additional enemies that can add problems. In any other game, it might be annoying, but here it really works and actually makes certain encounters a lot more interesting. So, I mean, even in the fact that these are kind of old school, traditional, not necessarily super creative bosses, there is a silver lining. Enemy variety can feel kind of weak at times, unfortunately. A lot of the enemies you're fighting at the very start will still be bothering you near the end of the game, with more hit points, of course. Overall, kind of wanted a little bit more. A lot of standard-ass zombies and knights and stuff. They do mix things up with something weird once in a while, stuff that really keeps you on your toes. That said, it is mostly knights and demons. The world of the undead does tease some bizarre creatures with its grotesque visuals built right in the scenery, but the actual enemies kind of samey here too. Mostly zombies, grim reapers, butterfly monsters, big face guys. The last one's, by the way, a little more interesting than the rest, but there does need to be more than just that. And I know that sounds like a serious complaint, but even Elden Ring started to get repetitive with enemies after a while, so I don't know that the lack of variety here is really a deal breaker. It's just an aspect of the game that could have been improved. And also, keep in mind that's from somebody who's played a lot of these games at this point. If you maybe pick out a Souls-like every once in a while, I don't know if it's gonna read as that noticeable. I don't know. I definitely try to see things from different perspectives, and it's not a big complaint for me, just a noticeable one. The music, however, really good for one of these games. They went full orchestra on this one, and it absolutely shows. It does lean kind of heavy on bombast over the more kind of melodic stuff you would hear in something like Bloodborne, which is what I generally prefer, but I also have to say that it really works. It's done well, it comes off well in terms of how cues line up and how the sounds and aesthetics and orchestra come. I mean, it's really good. There's also an entire multiplayer component of the game with its own version of covenants and everything that seems... it's fully featured, but I didn't experiment with it much in the pre-release build I was able to play it on. What I have seen seems pretty intriguing, but I don't think if I commented on it, it would really do it justice, whether that is good or bad. The game claims you can team up with a friend seamlessly, but I don't know how that works, because I didn't have any friends who had pre-release builds of Lords of the Fallen to play with me. But because of the multiplayer, this game has de novo anti-cheat, and there's a lot. I feel like it's worth speculating that it's the cause of the stuttering. I don't know if it's operating while you're playing single player, but if it is, oh, I would not be shocked. De novo kinda sucks horrifically. It could also just be Unreal Engine 5. I don't really know, but I'll say this. I run a lot of Unreal Engine 5 stuff. I run the demos. They don't act like this, so I don't really know. Honestly, this game is just a ton of stuff to like. The combat is satisfying. The exploration is excellent. And the visuals are very impressive. The problem here is just the performance on the PC. It might just be something involving my particular setup. I don't know. But for me, the PC performance is not good on this game. I am assuming it fares better on consoles. So, like, if you could play the game without the problems that I'm talking about, it's really a fantastic Souls-like, and I would recommend it, no problem. So, look into it, but I have to imagine it runs better on consoles, and that's probably where you should play it. But it's kind of hard to recommend for the PC in its current state. It's not unplayable, but it could be a whole lot better, and it's not like it's a mediocre game. It's actually a great game. Even with all of these problems, I'm personally thinking that, like, this is maybe not S tier, but A or B tier in terms of Souls likes. Like, okay, if you like Souls games, but you've been disappointed that they never really followed up on the first game's dense, interconnected world, Lords of the Fallen is gonna work for you. It can be a little exhausting because of how dense the world is, and for a game as big and complex as this one, the lack of a functioning real map is maybe for some disappointing, but otherwise there's just a ton to like here. It sometimes feels more like a successor to Dark Souls 2 with all the night bosses, but they're at least fun to fight. But the thing I think this really excels at is the exploration and world design, because it does that stuff so good. It just stutters so much on the PC. You watched this video, it drove you nuts, I promise you. If you're anything like me, it drove you nuts. The performance issues are the biggest problem with the game, period. Again, I hope that on console it plays better, because you're only dealing with one possible setup per console. It seems like a situation where optimization would be a lot easier, so I hope they have done it there. But on PC, they really need to put out a patch as soon as they can that fixes the stuttering. If they did that, I would give it a full-throated recommendation. I feel like it deserves it, but that is just one big problem that just, it's glaring. It's a problem with a lot of games nowadays, but it's a particular problem with this game, and I just don't think that it's right to recommend these games until they have them working. But beyond that, like, to say this is 10 times better than the original Lords of the Fallen, I think is an understatement. It doesn't do justice to the actual game itself, separate from the performance issues. And man, it really does deserve a lot of credit on all of these fronts, especially after such a troubled development cycle. If they get this thing running right, this is a hell of a Souls-like. And that's all for today. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications, and as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at Falcon the Hero. We'll see you next time, right here on GameRanx.